Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Real podcast. We're so excited that you're with us. Each and every week, we're going to open up God's Word. We're going to have some discussion around what it means to live an intentional life. So let's listen in as we try to get real together.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Get Real podcast. My name is Brandon Ginden. I am the senior pastor at Real Life Ministries, Texas, and I am here with my podcast partner, my ministry partner, my friend, Lori Arnold.
Hey friends.
And we are so grateful that you have joined us today here on this episode of our podcast. And I just want to welcome you, and I'm glad that you are here and want to encourage you that if this is your first time watching or listening to our podcast, that you would go back and check out other ones that we have and subscribe to our podcast. And if this has blessed you and encouraged you in your walk, that you would share our podcast with your friends and share it with the world. Because here at the Get Real podcast, what we believe in, what Lori and I are really trying to do is help those that follow the Lord Jesus Christ to walk out our faith in a real, practical way. And so on this podcast, we share different things that we go through and the struggles, successes, failures of life. And hopefully you can relate to and learn from some of the things that we share and talk about. We are concluding a series that we've been doing on parenting. And today we are going to be looking at a topic that can be difficult in our parenting, but absolutely essential, and that is boundaries. Having healthy boundaries within our families, helping our kids establish healthy boundaries with the world around them. Because boy, we live in a time right now that is trying to smash every boundary and putting our kids oftentimes in very difficult, challenging situations. And so we want to talk about that today and what it looks like to have healthy boundaries, parenting with boundaries, and really, Lori and I were talking about before the podcast here, this episode, about how boundaries apply across, from when they're babies, young, all the way through to, my goodness, I had a conversation last night with my oldest, who's 23, almost 24, about some boundary issues. And so it's important concept in life. And so Lori, I'm going to turn it over to you and just kind of talking in general about the principle of boundaries, and as you and Kevin have established those with your kids, and what that looks like for you and your own walk and y'all's family.
Yeah. I believe that boundaries they're necessary. You already mentioned that a little bit, but they're helpful. Mm-hmm. And it's been hard to navigate at times because our kids do not believe they are helpful.
Yes,
They just sound like rules that they have to follow, and they don't want to, they don't understand.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do understand, but they still don't like it.
Sure.
And don't want to. So I've had to make sure that I keep even with my own personal life,
right,
like just remembering the perspective that boundaries are helpful and they are healthy.
Yes.
And God gave us boundaries.
That's right.
Himself. So if God gives us boundaries, there's a reason, they're for a purpose.
Right. Absolutely. You mentioned that the Lord gives us boundaries, and to think about as God as being our heavenly Father, being our first parent. And he does. The Lord knows what's best for us. That, if we look at something like the 10 Commandments, the 10 Commandments were not given to be this great cosmic killjoy and ruin all of our fun.
Right.
The Lord gives those boundaries because he knows what works, what's best for us. Life does not work well if we steal from our neighbor.
Right.
Life doesn't work well if we have other gods than him. When you just go through it, those boundaries are about what works and what doesn't work.
Right.
When we're trying to establish boundaries with our kids, it's not because, yes, there is right and wrong, but it's for what is best for them, because as a parent, we believe this works better.
Yeah.
This is better for you to have this particular boundary. And you're right in that oftentimes our kids will view that as, oh, do I have to do this? And we have some that push against boundaries, some that are our rule followers, and kind of the whole gambit in between. But one thing that you had said is that you said it's good for me, it's good for us. And I think that's the place to start, is how important, if I don't have boundaries in my own life, okay, then how I could ever expect to have healthy boundaries for my kids. And so maybe talk about that, why that's important to you, kind of following the rules or establishing rules and boundaries for yourself before we even go and expect that of our kids.
Yeah, they're watching us.
Right.
We say this all the time, but we are the model, and I want to be a good model.
Yeah.
And not just, at face value, but truly, so that they can see my heart. They can understand my heart, that their hearts can be affected by the way that I treat them, the way that I'm treating myself, and those around me. Even things as small as like the cell phones. We talked about that, and it's like, we don't have to have our cell phones every single minute of the day.
Right.
So that was one thing that I actually had gotten that from Amber. When they get home, well, particularly my oldest, it was, your cell phone goes right here on the counter.
Yeah.
And then you go do your homework and things like that, and he actually took really well to it because he understood the why. And we also modeled the same thing. It wouldn't have been right for me to always be on the phone, and I'm on it a lot now, but I had to intentionally as well make sure that I was doing the same thing. So I would put my phone down too when I came in the house, or I'd make sure that I don't have my phone at the dinner table.
That's great.
And they know that there are times, like if we're having Regen on a Thursday night and there's a new whatever that we're doing as far as worship, or we've been having tech issues or things like that, I'll say, hey, they're in Regen right now. I've got to put my phone at the table, but I'm only answering if somebody from Regen calls,
Right.
So they're seeing me live that out. They're seeing Kevin live that out. He's on the phone way less than I am. But it helps them to be able to do it when they see that we're doing it as well.
Sure. There's two pieces that I heard you say that I think are so important that I don't want us to pass over. First is that you were saying that I have to be living this out. I have to model this. So modeling healthy boundaries, that you have boundaries in your own life is critical. But the second part you said is that why behind it, that they understand why. Now, I know at times as parents, we will ask or tell our kids to do something, and then why do I have to do? And sometimes the answer is because I told you so. Like because. And I get that, but also there's times when I think it's important that our kids understand the why.
Yes.
This is why we're doing this, and explaining that to them, because a principle that I think is important for us to know is that rules without relationship equals rebellion.
Yeah, that's good.
And so to know that if I don't have the relational clout, the relational equity with my kids in a certain topic, I haven't spoke to them, I haven't explained to it, I haven't spent the time with them, then there can be, especially as they get older and teenagers, and we're trying to ask them to do something, boy, not having spent some of the relational time with them can create some rebellion.
Oh yeah.
And some kids are naturally more rebellious than others anyway. and so that's a part of that. When you said the why, I thought of that I think it's important for us as parents to know our answer can't always be because I said so.
Right.
Is to sit down and spend the relational time and go, here's why. Especially one of the things that I've learned with my kids is when it's this is a major boundary. Like maybe it's dating, maybe and I think it is a cell phone thing, or friends that they're going to spend time with. And this group of kids is not best for them.
Yeah.
That's not a conversation that's 2 minutes in passing through the living room. One of the things that I've tried to do and Amber has just really done a great job encouraging this, is I'm going to take that kid out. We're going to go to dinner.
Yeah.
We're going to go out of the house and sit down, and I'm going to share my heart behind the why, and we're going to discuss it.
Yeah.
And so they can ask questions and they can see what I see and try to share that with them. But know at the end of the day, I can't bend on that boundary. We're going to hold that line. And so anyway, I just wanted to point those two things out that I think those are really healthy. For you, now let's talk about the differences with kids and boundaries. Okay, because I know you and I are different when it comes to rules, boundaries, right? And you are a rule follower.
Yes, I am.
And you've said
I take pride in that. Like, I am a rule follower. I'm a good kid.
And you have a kid or two that's not.
Yes, Lord.
And so let's talk about that. So when we establish a boundary, the differences with our kids, how you kind of navigate that or walk through some of that when it comes to establishing boundaries with kids that vary in some of that.
Yeah, this is my growth area.
Okay.
Like, because I was raised with kind of, my parents raised me with that because I said so mentality, but it was easy for me because I didn't ask a lot of questions and ask why, because naturally I am a rule follower. Not saying I never did anything. I can like count the things that I did when I was little, like on one hand, maybe two. Yeah. And I remember them distinctly. And my kids are not like that. I have one who is, but for the most part. But for me, I didn't ask a lot of why. Why do I have to do that? Da, 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 da. And two of mine, particularly my youngest, he is so curious about everything, which is good. I see it as a good thing. But I also knew very quickly, I have to answer him. I love that you mentioned that we can't just always say because I said so.
Right.
I was fine with because I said so. It didn't mess with me at all. I didn't feel tension or anger or like, I can't believe they're saying this to me. And that will set him off and it will set my other one off, and that doesn't mean they always do something about it, like push back necessarily verbally, but I know that it creates tension in them. And he sincerely wants to know the reason because it helps him to follow the rule or not to break the boundary or push past the boundary. And for instance, I think I may have mentioned this a long time ago, but he always he runs with his face sideways, like he's not looking straight. And he's gotten a lot better. He's 10 years old now, but oftentimes he would just run and he's looking to the left or the right. And I'm like, dude, you're going to crash into a person, a car, it's not going to be pretty, And so that would happen. He'd also just run in the street, just run in the street without looking, because he's looking to the left and to the right. So he just ran in the street. And I had to one day tell him the why it's so important that he doesn't do that.
Right.
A kid like me, if my mom would have said, Lori, don't go in that street. Yes, ma'am. And I don't go in the street.
Right.
But he wasn't going to do that until he understood, oh, I can actually get hit by a car.
Yeah.
Okay. He needed to hear the why.
Sure.
And so I do have to treat them differently. Like I said, I do have one rule follower. You can tell him how to do something and he will do it exactly how you said. My other two will push every single boundary and they will make a masterpiece of creative art with whatever it is that you give them. So I know that you're a little different too from the way that I am.
I am. Yeah. Yes. Rules or suggestions kind of thing. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I think about I am a kind of a rebellious person. I don't think it's been it depends on the time, but as a kid, I wasn't, didn't get in a lot of trouble. I really wanted to please my parents. But if somebody told me I couldn't do something, that was like game on. I'm going to figure out how to, I'm going to figure out a way to go do it more around tasks. Or if somebody told me I couldn't climb something, or you couldn't get a hit off this pitcher, or you couldn't make a basket from this distance, whatever those kind of challenges were, I was going to do that till my arms fell off. Like I had to do it. So I've been that way, but and rules, we'll find ways around it if we have to. So I've always been that way, but I also known and understood, and I think this is the important lesson for us as parents, is when a boundary is in place and if I do this with the kids, and I know the Lord is this way, you can't move it.
Yeah.
It's got to be firm. We have to hold to it. If I, with our kids, when we set, this is bedtime, this is dinner time, we're all going to be sitting down together at dinner. We're not, up and around or whatever. Like when we set some basic structure and rules, that we hold to those things and we don't shift them. And that's the part that, like, for you go with your son, do not go in the street.
Yeah.
And I explain the why. What I'm hearing you is you didn't shift the boundary to go, well, you can go partway in the street, or, well, I'm not going to worry about it this time, because some of those are life and death.
Yeah.
And understanding that holding firm on those boundaries creates safety. It creates a security within the family, and holding to those rules and understanding that. And that's what the Lord does through the word.
Yeah.
And so I can kind of joke about, some of that, finding ways around obstacles. And I have done some of that in my life, and rules are a little squishy, but I also do understand that when there's a boundary in place, you have to hold to it.
Oh yeah. I'm like the queen of follow through.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
yes,
and
you are.
my kids know that, and sometimes it's hard because they can be persistent and very strong-willed, and they don't give up.
Right.
But I know that I've got to hold the line. I've got to stick to it. Kevin and I are so consistent, and we've got each other's back on everything.
That's so important.
And we've told them, like, we're on the same team.
Yeah.
So if you try to go and talk to him and get a different answer, I need you to know we are on the same team. Like, you're kind of on our team.
Yeah.
But we are on the same team, and you're going to get the same response. And if you get a different one, there's going to be a problem later.
Right.
And it's not going to be because of us. It's because you tried to get us off of the same team.
Yes.
So it doesn't work well.
Right.
But you mentioned that it
so
creates security. And I think that's because it builds trust. Like the kids don't even realize that's happening.
Right.
But over time, if they see that mom means what she says and dad means what he says, or they're sticking to everything they have said that they're going to do, that builds trust over time, which builds and cultivates the relationship even more, even though it's hard sometimes.
Well, and I think that ultimately what you're hoping will transfer to our kids, in that as they become adults, it's important that they have boundaries. They have boundaries with kids. They've seen it. You said it at the very beginning, that it's been modeled. And in a world that's constantly shifting what true is, shifting boundaries, what's good for you is good for you, and what's good for all of that nonsense around that does not work well in healthy relationships. It doesn't work well in to have a healthy family. Boundaries are good and healthy, and looking at it, if you were to shift or to change a boundary, that's something that you and Kevin would look at and go, okay, we had this boundary in place. The kids are older. We can adjust it. We can expand it, but we're going to do that together and in unity. One of the things I'd really encourage all of you that are watching or listening is there's great resources that's out there. The book Boundaries with Kids is fantastic. If this is something that you are learning, or you're just starting, or maybe you have struggled with your kids, to go and learn and grow. And those are things that I know that for you and Kevin, Amber and I, we have a library full of books that my wife has read on the topic of boundaries. And I've read some, but I'm not the reader that she is. And so I would just encourage you to do that. Lori, maybe one final thing. If we have parents out there that have really struggled with this, they have that kid that pushes every single boundary, or they look at it and go, I haven't done a good job at holding boundaries. What would you encourage that person, that parent, to do out there?
Just as you mentioned books. There are resources that help with that. But also to give yourself some grace, because we're all figuring this out. There's no manual that says exactly what we are to say and do when our kids do X, Y, Z, you know? And so it is hard, and they're all so different, as are we. So give yourself some grace, and it's never too late to start. I say it all the time. It's never too late to start. Even like I mentioned with me personally, there's things that I'm working on myself still today with my personal boundaries that I have with relationships.
Yes.
So it's never too late to start.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're hoping that some of these sparked some interest or encouraged you. I too, along with what Lori's saying, really want to encourage everybody that you can get started. If it's something you say, I just haven't done a good job at this, well, take some steps forward. Find the little things that you can start to do. Hold consistent on a couple of those boundaries that you've put in place. If you have that child that is just the rebellious and the pusher and shoves on every single boundary, to reach out to ask other parents, what have they done, and look and get some help with that. And we talked about this on the last 2 episodes, is maybe it is time to take that child and take them out on a kind of a date day and have conversations with them, listen to them and hear their heart, what's going on with them. And maybe it's a solution could be just some relational time that they need. Regardless of where you are with it, we just want to encourage you that establishing these boundaries, and we said it at the very beginning of this series, parenting is not for the faint of heart, and it's a challenge, and we live in a world that is constantly pushing in a direction of unhealthy things. And so we hope that everybody that's listening has learned and take away some things from this series. Well, we look forward to the next one and you joining us on that. God bless you all.
Hey, thanks for joining us on the Get Real podcast today. My hope each and every week is that you're able to take the content, apply it to your life, that it becomes more of who you are and less of what you do, and that we live an intentional life together. If you're interested in supporting the work of ministry here at Real Life Texas, we'd like to invite you to do that by going to reallifetexas.org/give and supporting us today.